All right, let's go to another question. Jim, this was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from DJ in Toronto. Hi, Jim and Brian. Your month-by-month Midnight Express retrospectives led me into a rabbit hole.
Uh-oh.
Where I am now...
Hopefully he was able to get out without the fire department.
Where I am now trying to watch as much wrestling from January 1984 as possible. I've done this. The TV during the week of January 7th, 1984 was obviously a big week for you guys. But it was also a big week for Mean Gene. Or so it would seem. Because he is on both episodes of WWF Wrestling and AWA. Is there a story behind that? Or am I being led astray by YouTubers sticking arbitrary dates on their stuff? Thank you. So
well,
again,
no, I guess
January 7th, 84 is the date.
There would have been overlap, wouldn't there? Because Vern taped a lot of stuff in advance, especially if it was local promos. We don't know what particular segments in these shows that he's talking about, and that would be right after Christmas and New Year's. So I would, and Hogan went to Japan in Thanksgiving-ish 83 and was supposed to come back to the AWA, but instead was in the Garden at Christmas time, right?
He was in the Garden a little bit after that, but he was in St. Louis at Christmas time.
That's right. But point being, since the thing with Gene happened about the same time, I bet you that Vern had taped weeks worth, and this was the bone of contention, that Hogan no-showed a bunch of shows in the AWA he was supposed to come back for. So the local promos with Gene hosting were taped like 4 or 5 weeks out. And they were playing, and that's another knock on the AWA that people registered, was that even when they knew Hogan wasn't coming back, they didn't change the promos because they were all, fuck, this guy's fucking us. But if we change the interviews, then we'll fuck ourselves because people won't buy a ticket. Will as many ask for a refund if they're already there as they will, it just won't come. And isn't fuck it, we're going to play the fucking interviews. So Gene would have still been on the AWA television show in some fashion right about the time that he started in the WWF, which was at the start of 84. So yes, it did and probably did. We haven't seen it, but and that's the excuse for how it happened.
How do you think you would have dealt with it if you were Vern or any promoter and you had Hogan and all of a sudden he starts ghosting you and he does all these promos? And again, JYD did a bunch of promos for Mid-South stuff. Mean Gene was the person who did all the local promos for the AWA. So everything with Hogan was Mean Gene. Everything with everyone was Mean Gene.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that's just pulled off your show and it's directly against you. In some of those AWA towns, that's the first place Vince McMahon tried to buy the TV out from the promoter that was there. So how do you think you would have dealt with that? If all of a sudden you build up these big shows around the holidays and the biggest star you have, which is the most exciting star you've had in years, is just gone.
Well, now you know why so many of the old-time promoters threaten to kill each other. And, because either you're going to jump out a window or you're going to try to throw the fucking guy that's put you in that position out the window, one or the other. What else are you going to do? And that's why many people were at Vince's throats. And there was discussion of, whether can we make Junior go away? That was discussed by some of the promoters. But, I've had that happen on a smaller level when, a couple times in Smoky Mountain, I advertised, well, at one time for Thanksgiving, Abdullah the Butcher, who was more than happy to agree to come, and until suddenly Japan called and offered him the Thanksgiving week, and he took that and didn't come, but that's what I got Dick Murdoch to come in and take his place, and we explained it. It was part of the package show. But to have a guy that's drawing that amount of money, and at the time, the amount of shows that they were running in the AWA every night of the week in these major buildings, it ended up, costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars probably.
And again, looking at this specific question, if you're a promoter and for years the face of your show doesn't necessarily do commentary, but in terms of every interview, every local promo for every local market is Gene Okerlund, and he's a character. He's not just generic announcer guy holding a microphone.
Yeah.
He becomes a popular figure. Does that hurt almost as much as Hogan in terms of the way the people locally will perceive the new show coming into town?
Well, yes, because the announcer that had been there for that long, wrestlers come and go, and even though there had not been direct opposition to the AWA like that, people knew the wrestlers come and go and work for other, organizations, and they read it in the magazines or whatever. But the announcer was like your guy, the hometown. When Lance Russell was not able to come to the new Memphis show, when Jarrett split off from Goulas for 6 weeks because he had to work out his notice with the other station, it killed the show. People are, what the fuck? Because it was disorienting and they weren't used to it. If you had an announcer that, was just one of 5 or 6 guys in the company, or was, hadn't been there that long, that might be one thing. But when you had, the guy that had been really associated with the program and with all of the stars and for so long, and he's gone and on the other side, that hurt. It gave them credibility. And the local fans would, say, okay, well, fuck, we usually like the AWA, but there's Gene, and yeah, Hogan's there. And then when they got Mad Dog Vachon and the Crusher, well, that was it.
This footage of that the WWE put on one of their commercial tapes early on, it's like Mad Dog Vachon's debut in St. Paul, I think. And the fans, I don't think a lot of the fans knew he was going to be there. So those are people who grew up on AWA. They're now going to these WWF shows. And out comes Mad Dog Vachon. They lose their shit.
Yeah.
And then he goes in there and has just a really bad... His opponent kind of sucked, but it was really
because
bad.
He was 60. Mad Dog was 60 by that point. He wasn't he in the 48 Olympics?
Yeah, something
like that. This was 1984, so do the math. And that's what I've always talked about. There were bigger stars in wrestling in the territory days that you never really got to see. And Mad Dog Vachon never wrestled in Louisville, Kentucky. But he was one of the biggest stars, one of the biggest draws, one of the biggest names in the business for decades. But if you ask somebody in Louisville, if they hadn't read a wrestling magazine, they wouldn't have the first fucking clue who you were even talking about. So that's how you could always bring new wrestlers into a territory and make new stars for your fans, because there was always somebody they had never seen. And now, you see everybody, and you see them from the point where they're just starting out and they're greener than goose shit and they can't grab their ass with both hands. And then it's harder to get into it after that.